Hi, I'm Amanda Morgan from NotJustCute.com, and I'm here again with author Heather Shumaker from the book It's Okay Not to Share. I have my trusty copy right here again. And we're joined today by Emily Plank, who's joining us all the way from Switzerland, so we're excited to have her. She's a blogger at Abundant Life Children, right? And it's a great blog. I would highly recommend it. And Emily actually is one of the first ones that introduced me to Heather's writing, I believe, on one of her blog posts or a Facebook post. So that was the first introduction I think I had to Heather's book. So I'm really excited that Emily stopped sailing the world and landed in one place so that she could join us on one of these chats. But the section that we're talking about today is section, let me look it up again, is it 5 that we're looking at? 6. Chapter 6, so we're talking about bad words, polite words, and lies. And the first section talks about saying the word I'm sorry. It actually starts with the polite things. But Heather, you write about how it's important not to force kids to say sorry. And I learned this the hard way when my oldest were quite little. And I remember one of my particularly strong-willed kids had done something, and I told him he needed to stay where he was until he said sorry. And as I sat in that moment, I realized what a disaster that was, that even if I could make him stay there till he said sorry, no matter what I did, I couldn't make him feel sorry. And it was one of those parenting moments, you know, when you stand there and realize, I've got this all wrong, I've got this all mixed up. So I love the way you wrote about it. Can you explain why, even though we as adults think that we're helping kids to learn manners by forcing them to say sorry, it's actually not helpful at all, and that we could go about it in a better way?
Yeah, exactly. You know, saying sorry is something, it's kind of like the title of the book, It's Okay Not
Quite little, and I remember one of my particularly strong-willed kids had done something, and I told him he needed to stay where he was until he said sorry. And as I sat in that moment, I realized what a disaster that was. That even if I could, I think we have a feedback loop or something. It's amazing you can even get sound to travel across the world that fast.
You want me to start over?
I got this all mixed up. So I love the way you wrote about it. Can you explain why, even though we as adults think that we're helping kids to learn manners by forcing them to say sorry, hold on. And that we could go about it in a better way.
Yeah, exactly. You know, saying sorry is something, it's kind of like the...
There we go. That'll work. I think we've got our loop to Switzerland here. Let me try this. There we go. There we go. Okay. If you want to go again, Heather.
Sure. I just saying sorry, just like the title of the book, It's Okay Not to Share. It's really one of those things that gets us deep in the heart. It's very hard for us as adults not to try to get our kids to say sorry. It's very deeply ingrained, and a lot of people have strong reactions to the idea that there might be a better way. But as your experience showed, you can't force remorse. You can't force that remorse. And our job is twofold as parents here. We want to help encourage the child to develop those moral qualities, the ethical, the feelings of compassion and remorse and all those things which will develop. But then the other part of our job is to socialize children. So we do want them to learn what a social norm is. Whatever country and culture we're living in, we want them to learn how you behave in a certain circumstance. And sometimes we're focused more on I've got to get them to say this word right now, rather than focusing on the bigger aspect, which is the moral development. They are both important, and they will both come. But here's what happens when we try to teach a child that's not ready yet to say sorry or insist they say sorry. They learn very quickly that saying sorry is just a magic word. It gets them off the hook. Whether they do something on purpose or it's an accident, all they have to do, they bump into someone, oh, sorry, and you can just tell from the tone of voice that it's not genuine. What means much more to kids and really helps the kid who feels wronged, the one who got bumped or whatever it is that happened, is for the kid to come back and to the scene and make a guarantee, such as, I won't push you again, I won't step on your picture, I won't knock down your tower. Then the other kid feels safe, and the guarantee usually sticks. If the kid says they're not going to knock over your tower again, generally they don't. And if they have trouble with that, you just say, it's too hard for you right now. I'm going to move your body away. I won't let you do that. And then kids are also great at taking action. Like, they may not be so good at talking, but they can go get an ice pack or go get a tissue or go get a Band-Aid or do something. And that action of doing something, they're very good with their bodies, so they can do that. And they also brings them back to the scene because they have to deliver whatever it is. But if you watch a kid who's forced to say sorry, they'll say sorry and walk away. You know, there's none of that connection and seeing what happened, and there's no guarantee of safety that the other kid feels. So that if you model it, if you model saying sorry, and model saying it to your kid, if you do something wrong, then they will pick up that social norm.
And that's one part I think I noticed when people were worried about that if we didn't force them to say sorry, they would never learn it. And I think that's the piece that sometimes they're missing, is that we model it, and that's how they learn it. And as kids get older, you know, I'll maybe talk to them about, you know, you can maybe ask them, do you feel bad? How can you let them know how you're feeling? And they kind of get the prompt that, oh yeah, that's how I tell them. And I've tried to, instead of telling kids, you know, when they bump into each other or you see those accidental collisions, rather than saying, make sure you tell him sorry, I try to remind them, will you check and see if he's okay? So that, it, like you're saying, gets more at the action part rather than forcing a feeling, which we can't, or forcing them to communicate something that may or may not match up with a feeling. But I can prompt action and see, you know, you can see action, you can't see their emotions. So that's what I try to give instructions about their actions, and then hopefully the emotion follows, like you said, with the modeling as well.
And the key is also, if it's coming from the inside of a child, they will use the tools like saying sorry when they feel that feeling. So when you've done your job well as an adult who's guiding a kid, if the kid does it without your prompting, if they do it when they don't even know you're watching. So if two kids have a little problem and one says genuinely sorry to the other, then you kind of notice that, well, they've picked that up and they've accepted that. It doesn't always happen when they're very young, but it will happen.
And Emily, I know you've got children of your own, and I believe you also, did you have a preschool or a home care? So I know you've definitely seen a lot of run-ins with children. Yes. Running into each other, accidental or purpose or whatever. Do you have experience with this, with what Heather's talking about, either saying the word that they don't mean or watching kids who actually do develop the moral development, like she mentions, not just the words and the social scripts, but the actual moral development?
Absolutely. And I think what's so interesting is we all hear the fake apologies and we all know what it sounds like, and yet we don't have other tools to use. And I think that what Heather was talking about helping kids be active in solving the problem rather than just the pat apologies. I was always surprised with the kids, both in my small preschool that I ran for a while and with my own children, that when I do give them the opportunity to help make a situation right, they come up with some really creative ideas for what could help solve problems. And so it's their action of making amends rather than just the actual words, I'm sorry, that help resolve a situation. I think the other thing that's interesting is to think about how I feel when I'm really angry at somebody or when I've done something wrong. If an outsider were to come to me and say, Emily, you need to go apologize. You did something wrong, which, you know, it happens. We all do things that are wrong. And if somebody were to come to me and force me to apologize in those moments when I feel so strongly, and I'm just not ready to do it yet, it's not helpful for me, it's not helpful for the situation. And so when my kids are at each other or when a situation happens in my preschool, if I can just remember what it feels like to be in that situation, it can help pull me out and say, okay, what are some other alternatives to help deal with this besides forcing children to say something that they don't actually believe?
And we see that, I think, so much in society with adults who are saying sorry and they don't feel sorry. I mean, you see it in politics or, you know, in the media or wherever, people that make their big public apologies and people are watching going, really? Are you really sorry? I think it's something that begins at childhood to really understand what this word means, and that it's not just, like you said, Heather, a get out of jail free card. It's not just something we say and then we can move on with everything, but it's something that you mean. And I like, Heather, how you mentioned that kids are really good at action, and so when we give them the action part, not only does that solidify what it really means to be sorry, it means to say it, but also to try to fix it. but it also helps them. I think I've watched kids who are, particularly those that are very sensitive, and they feel badly when they hurt another child, and giving them an action, something that they can do that makes them feel like they've fixed it, helps soothe that guilty feeling as well. Whereas if they just said sorry, they just still feel guilty. But if they try to fix the problem or help them feel better, I see that it helps both kids to feel better faster. The second part of the section that, Heather, you mentioned that a lot of people have a lot to say about this topic, and that is, I think you entitled it, Let Your Kids Swear. Is that the title, or one of the section headings, to just let your kids swear? So will you explain what you mean by that?
Yes, isn't that a great title? We do let our kids swear, but what we say is, if you want to say that word, you need to say it in the bathroom. So you can say that word as much as you want in the bathroom, or in your room with the door closed, or some families it might be in the basement. Give a designated spot, because just the way we can't force a child to sleep, much as we want them to sleep, there's no sleep button. We can't 100% control what words come out of their mouth. And that's tricky, because if a child's hitting or kicking, you can actually, if they're young, you can physically control their bodies. It's very hard to control speech. And so I think parents feel this sense of, I don't know what to do, I don't want to hear it, I want to teach them what's polite and what's okay and what's not, but they don't know what to do. And censorship is usually what parents turn to. They'll just say, you can't say that word, or don't you dare say that word to me, or I don't want to hear that, or that word is not allowed in this house. And that's all censorship. And of course, as soon as the kid gets that nugget of information, they think, ooh, mom just reacted in a big way, or dad doesn't like that. Now they know how to get your goat. And, we want to avoid giving them that ammunition. So if they're learning words, give them a place to say it. And they can say it, if you tell them they can say it as much as they want, they're pretty amazed, and they shut the bathroom door, and they'll go in there and spout off for a while, and then when they're ready to come out, they come back out. But really, a lot of it's about explorations in power. Think about when adults swear, depending on your household. Maybe it's a lot, maybe it's none, maybe it's a little. But usually those words are reserved for times of intense emotion or frustration, or, oh shoot, I forgot something. And so we all need something big and strong once in a while to express ourselves. And kids notice the power when they hear somebody on the bus or at school or in the family say one of those big words. They're like, woo, that was a big strong word, I want one of those. And so they're trying out the power. One thing that you can do is explain what the word means and explain where it's okay to say it, which for our family is the bathroom with the door closed. But then also and you can also say, that's a big word for mommy to use when she's really mad. Do you need a big word too? Do you need a powerful word? And they'll usually say yes, and then they think up a word, hypocaloric, funnel burgers, any kind of big strong word, chump, whatever the kids come up with, because then that's their word, and you can say, all right, chump, that's your word, and if you say that word, I'll know you're really angry. And sometimes the kid will even say, that's my word. You can't say it. It's only my word. So those are some ideas.
And I love that you give those substitution words, because like you said, it is, again, it's back to power, which a lot of issues for children, it's about power and control, particularly in the preschool years. And so not just, like you mentioned, censorship just tries to hold them down and take all that power away, but instead looking at how we can give them appropriate power and teach them appropriate social boundaries as well. And I love your advice. I think you say to be dull and calm when they're using these big words. And I think that's exactly what we need to do. That overreacting just feeds the flames, because like you said, it does just what they want to, or sometimes takes them by surprise, and then they're going to try it out again. I know one of my boys said a pretty big swear word one day, and it took me off guard, and I was about 2 seconds away from doing, just like you said, overreacting and saying, we don't say that word, when I realized, I was thinking, how would he even know that word? And I thought, he doesn't know that word. He was like playing with sounds and rhymes, and I just happened to hear this one swear word, so I just didn't even say a thing, because I thought, like you said, if I call his attention to it, then he's going to say it again. If I say nothing, the odds of that combination coming together again isn't very likely. And sometimes it's the overreaction that actually creates our problem, because it feeds that power, like you said. And I also love that you give the advice, if you really don't want your kids to swear at all, then you need to make sure as a parent you don't swear at all. Because like you said, if they see us using words, then those are words that we're going to need to let them use and give them the right boundaries to use them and teach those boundaries. And I love, like I've mentioned before, through this whole book, I love that you give advice and give the principle, and it can be applied to whatever the family's individual personalities and standards, I guess, are, that you give that opening for that.
One thing about that is even families who have absolutely no big swear words in their house, and even if they homeschool, and even if they try to have a very insular, that my kid will never hear these words, kids will pick them up. Even walking down the street, they will pick them up, and if they haven't picked them up by first grade, they will. It happens. It happens by living.
And my older child, I think with younger, like preschool years, which you address most pronounced in this book, they're playing with those words. And my oldest child is now to the age that he can kind of recognize what are bad words, and he's asking about them. And I think the same advice applies, to be calm and dull and very matter of fact and honest about it and having the discussion. And it kind of lays that groundwork if you begin in the preschool years, giving them powerful words and talking about what words mean rather than overreacting and blowing up and giving those words even more power than they have to begin with. But like you said, it will come one way or another. They come eventually, and we need to be able to give them the freedom of the things they can control and talk about the things that we can set boundaries on as well.
And can I add something into this conversation real quick? I think what's so interesting and is so important, Heather, what you're saying about the purpose of the words and why the kids are using the words. So if the word is necessary for the child to feel powerful, and you take their power away, you haven't helped the child get their needs met. If the child is using the word because they're trying to get attention, and you take the word away, you haven't helped the child get their needs met. And so in the end, they're going to find a way to get their needs met. They have to find a way to get their needs met, and our job is to help them do that. And so we have to continue to ask, why is this going on, and what can I do to help facilitate it in a way that works in my family community?
That's a really, really great point, Emily. That I love how you point out that it's the need that we have to look at underneath it, not just what's going on, but what's the need below it. I love that point, that so often we try to just stop behavior, but we haven't addressed the need. That applies to so many situations. I'm glad that you brought that up. That's a great, great point. And I think it carries over as well into the other section that you talk about, Heather, which is young kids and lying, which I think is another thing that we look at with our adult lenses and can overreact about kids not telling the truth. But when we take those lenses off and look at it from a developmental perspective, lying is a totally different issue with young children than it is for adults. Do you want to talk a little bit about that developmental perspective?
Yeah, sure. A lie is something that really gets us in the gut usually when our sweet little young child lies to us, and it's a blatant lie usually because they're not developed intellectually enough to do a really sophisticated lie. So, they got cookie crumbs on their chin, and did you eat a cookie? No. Well, don't lie to me. Usually a lie is a desire to please, and it actually shows when your child begins to lie, it's actually a step in intellectual development. So you can think of it, yay, my child grew some new brain cells. They're able to do this level of thinking now. Also, but it's mostly they're wanting to please us. They're wanting to give us the answer they think we want to hear, and we can translate what they say into a wish. So often you can translate their lie and say, gosh, you wish you hadn't done this. I told you not to touch the vase on the shelf, and you touched it, and you wish you hadn't done that. So you can translate things, and then they'll often tell you all about it. But if you did it, well, then you're just getting into a power play, and it's not getting at what they really need to hear. So the lying is something often they want to talk to you about it, but there's some fear or they're scared that you won't like them, that you'll be mad at them, all these things. And so if you let them know that what you like is when they tell you exactly what happened, that's a lot better information for them to hear. And just translate what they say into, you wish that's the way it happened. You wish you hadn't knocked over the plant. I don't like to make mistakes either, you know, that kind of thing.
And as with all of these other things that take a developmental perspective that we've talked about, it doesn't mean that eventually we don't get to that point. I think often that's where people overreact and object to taking this perspective because they think, well, then they'll never learn that lying's wrong. But it starts here. If we can start where they're at and have those discussions to help them understand what it means, then they do developmentally grow into that understanding. But we can't force them to see it from adult perspective when they, like you said, don't have the brain capacity. They aren't going to see it the way that we see it right away. I love that developmental perspective that you carry through the whole book and talking to them at the level that they understand, and that brings them eventually to a more mature understanding, more so than if we force the other way around, I think.
Well, and again, I think that goes to the way what we're looking for underneath the behavior. Lying is the behavior, but what's underneath it? It's this desire to please. And so when we give them that language, you wish you had done, you wish you hadn't touched the vase, but you did. Let's see what we can do to make it right now. Again, honoring that desire to please while still helping them structure it in a way that is pro-social and eventually will not be lying anymore. But lying is self-preservation at some point, and so when children have this desire to please, they have this desire to keep themselves protected from you knowing the truth about what they did or all these kinds of things. Once they learn that we're trying to help them meet their needs regardless of what happened, then they have the safety and the ability to come and tell the way it really happened, even if it's difficult for them to do.
Yeah, that's a great point, because it all does come back again to that safety in the relationship and having a strong relationship and open communication in all of these topics that allows them, like you said, that's when they really learn to tell the truth, because they feel safe in telling the truth, because they know that you're understanding their needs and that you're understanding them as they are. It's a great point and a great section that you have in there. Was there anything else that either of you wanted to add from this section?
I think the only other thing really is that lying and making mistakes are often very linked. And adults are also mistake averse. We just don't like making mistakes, and if we do make one, we don't want anyone else to see. We don't want to admit it. Kids are, especially boys, are particularly worried about that shame of making a mistake and doing it in front of somebody, admitting that they did that. And when you're growing and you're little and you're young, your life is a series of very obvious mistakes. Spill the milk at dinner. I mean, it just seems like you can't do anything right. And so having so many mistakes and then being caught in making a mistake and you wish you hadn't done it, a lot of that's tied together. Those emotions of shame and wanting to be perfect and wanting to be bigger and more agile with your fingers than you are goes along with the lying.
And I think I would love to add one other thing, as you're talking about this. We have children that are experiencing this right now. My kids are going through lots of lying. And one of mine said to me the other day, she said, "Mom, it feels like you never believe me, or you never take what I say at face value." My husband and I were talking about that after the fact, and we were talking about how kids want you to take their side. Like, they want somebody who has their back, who's going to support them. And so her attempt to gain my support is to tell me a story she knows I want to hear, rather than the actual story, because she thinks if she tells me the actual story, then she no longer has my support because she's done something that she shouldn't have been doing. And so it's this whole cycle of building trust. Kids want to know that they have our support and our love and our attention and our respect, even though they make lots of mistakes.
I think that's a great point. Thank you so much for adding that, Emily. I love your perspective, and that's part of why I love Emily's blog. So please check out Emily's blog. It's so great at getting to the heart of kids and getting to the root of problems rather than just addressing the behavior, like you mentioned before, getting at what's really going on. So thank you for bringing that perspective, and thank you, Heather, again, for another great section in this book and for another chat about the book. If you haven't been reading Heather's book, you can jump to our read-along page and start at the beginning or start where we are. She wrote the chapters independently so that you can either just get right to the chapter that you need right now to deal with whatever's going on, or you can begin at the beginning. It's a great book. All of it's worthwhile. So join us on our read-along at whatever phase you'd like to do that. Thank you again, Emily and Heather, for joining us today. And I'm Amanda Morgan from NotJustCute.com. We'll catch you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.